Hey, all you wonderful gardeners out there. I want to thank you all so much for following along and supporting the Urban Gardener channel. Now, let's get growing. All right, everybody. Welcome all of you awesome gardeners out there to the Let's Get Growing show here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch and I am your host today. And we've got a really fun and exciting show today for you all. We've got a couple of really awesome guests from the continent of Australia. So that's what we're going to be doing today, similar to what we did a few weeks back. We had a show where all of our guests were from the UK. Well, today's show, both of our guests are from Australia. And so, just right up front, they are pre recorded interviews. So, all of you who are joining with us and joining in the chat, stick around, ask questions because I'm going to be in the chat box with all of you there during our interviews. So I want to hear from all of you out there. I want to hear about all of the things that you've got growing on. And also, if you are joining with us today and you're joining with us live, or watching us on replay as well too. I mean, I want to acknowledge all of you for joining the show, watching the replays that are available on YouTube, and our show is also a podcast. I know some of you out there are listening to the audio version of our show too, so I want to thank all of you as well for joining us here on the Let's Get Growing show. So if you are here live, be sure to get into our chat box and ask any questions or anything like that that you might have. And I will be in the chat box with you today, and I'll answer all of those questions. And we'll have a really fun gardening chat while we're getting to know and hear all about the different things that our guests from Australia have to talk about. I mean, there's some really great things. We got one of our guests. In fact, I'll just say, our channel of the week this week is Marty Ware from Marty's Garden. He's somebody I've been following and a good friend of for many years now, that I've been watching and checking out his channel and all of that. I really enjoy it. He does some really great stuff with his channel. Plus, he also does some surfing too. It has a surfing channel, but yeah, so he'll be joining with us here real soon. We'll be jumping into that interview real quickly here, and later in the show we will be talking with Charlie Mgee, who is the lead singer and founder of an Australian band called Formidable Vegetable. Now, I can't remember exactly what it was that I came across them many years ago, but they make really fun songs and really have fun with the whole idea of permaculture and gardening and growing food and sustainable living, all of that sort of stuff, and some really great things and a great way to inspire people through music. So we'll talk a lot about that with them and check out some of their music as well too. So we'll have some music in this show a little bit later on as well too. So again, be sure to join us in the chat box there. Also, give the video and the show a big thumbs up, and hit the like button as well as the subscribe button too if you haven't yet already. And be sure to share our show with all of your garden friends, your garden groups, and those sort of things out there. Let everybody know what we've got growing on over here on the Urban Gardener channel and the Let's Get Growing show. So you can also check out our website at letsgetgrowing.live, and there you can check out all the things going on with our show, upcoming guests. You can check out all of our past guests and our past shows, and just everything all about the show, the Urban Gardener, and all of that there at the website. And yeah, awesome. And as well, too, real quick, right up at the front of the show, too, I want to acknowledge that this show is sponsored by our good friends at Ivy Organics. And you can go over to ivyorganics.com, check out their shop. They've got a really cool 3-in-1 plant guard. They got some awesome, a really awesome, well balanced organic fertilizer. I talk about those all the time on my videos. They have some really great stuff over there at ivyorganics.com. So go over there, check out what they got there, get some of those, get some of that fertilizer, and use our promo code GROW10 in their shop, GROW10, and you can save 10% off. We want to thank them for sponsoring our show and being a part of what we're doing here. We've been, just really having a lot of fun with this show here. And as you've probably noticed over the last few weeks, the things have been a little bit different with the format, and we're just kind of switching some things up and thinking about some things, working on the segments, thinking about possible segments and different sort of things, as our show is just, we're only about, I think this is our 12th or 13th show. So we're really, just getting started here. So we're just kind of trying to feel out what everybody wants to see, what everybody would like to see. So one of the things I want to ask you again, too, at the top of this show is, if you are joining with us, get down in the comments section below, especially for all of those who are watching the replay, and let us know what you think of the show. I love to hear about what you think of the show. I love to hear, any sort of feedback. What do you think of certain segments? What do you think of possible segments that you think would be great for a gardening show? What are the sort of things you want to hear that on our show as we move forward here into the future? We've got a lot planned, and a lot of great upcoming guests still to talk with here on the show. But I do want to, hear about what you all think, and if you do have any possible guests, people that you might like to hear a interview, a conversation with. I'd love to hear about your ideas of who would make some really great guests for our show as well, too. This is a live show. It's about audience participation and being a part of the show, and that's what makes you so important. The audience, the viewers, the people who are watching this show, to give us the feedback that we need to hear, so we can make sure that this show is just what you want to see and what you're spending your time on Saturday mornings, or anytime if you're watching the replay or listening to our podcast as well, too. But I really want to thank you all for all of your support. We've been getting really good feedback so far, but I want to hear more. I want to hear from what you guys all think about what we've been doing here so far. And we'll see where we get moving as we are working on different things, and hopefully some awesome, really cool guests that will continue to join with us here on the Let's Get Growing show, because that's the whole idea here, is to have a fun kind of Saturday morning conversation and discussion, all centered around our love and our passion for gardening, growing things, whether you like to, grow an ornamental garden, or you do more of what I really like to do, is grow food, all those sort of things, and all things in between as well, too. So, we want to really have a great conversation here each weekend, and have that available to all of you here who are viewers and subscribers to the Urban Gardener channel. Now, um, lots and lots of things going on this time of year. I know that's probably the same thing for all of you out there who are gardening as well, too. We've been planting, we've been, changing things out from our, cooler season, out of winter, early spring crops into our late spring, summer crops. And, there's just a lot of work, a lot of things that go into making sure that our gardens are taken care of. And I guess that really all really depends on size of your garden as well too. Uh, um, I like to consider myself a small space gardener, but I'm also someone who is really passionate about learning and growing and doing different things, that I've expanded my garden into spaces that aren't necessarily mine, in order to increase the amount of things that I get to grow. And so I've got larger amounts of space. I've got lots and lots of things going on. So again, it's a busy, busy time of year for us gardeners. And things, will soon just wind down to maintenance and care until we get to the harvest season, as there are just a couple of things left to plant out into the garden. After we've got most things, I think, already planted, there's just a couple of things I'm waiting for, in the next week or two, before I'll seed out maybe some beans and things of that sort, in the garden. But after that, things will be just, again, like I said, down to maintenance and harvesting later on. And that's really exciting too, as well. A lot of the different things that we've been growing. Again, I started seeds for my tomatoes and my peppers and things like that. I started those all, weeks ago. So it's really kind of cool, at this point in time, to see them now out into the garden, to see them now, starting to grow and starting to, take their place for the next several months. So I'm really excited about seeing, how things shape up. I've kind of done a couple of little different things than what I normally do in my garden space. So again, too, some more things, we're changing it up a little bit. We're doing and growing a few different things that we don't normally grow. And we're dealing with different things in our different spaces. So each year always kind of presents some new things, and we're just really kind of excited about seeing where those go. That's kind of where things are at right now. So I'm taking every bit of time. In fact, just before I got into uh, side to doing the show here today, I was scrambling to kind of get a couple of last minute things done out there, before I ran out of time to come in here and do the show. So again, lots and lots of things going on, lots and lots of things happening. So yeah, and I hope that's the same for you all, because ultimately it may be a bunch of work. It may be a lot of things that we got to do in order to get things put together, to have the gardens the way that we've been planning and thinking about them all, winter long. I've been thinking about and arranging things in my mind, and just have this vision of what my garden is supposed to look like, at this time of year. And uh and um so it's kind of exciting to have got to this point now, see that I was able to put together most things, and things are looking really good, considering some of the limitations that we've had to go through. But yeah, I mean, that's again, like I said, I hope that's the same for you, that the vision that you thought about is coming true in your garden space, and you're getting to grow the things that you were looking to grow. I grow a lot of things from seed, so that's one of the things I've been kind of dealing with as I'm planting out some of the last things. Is, I plan out a lot of these different varieties that I want to grow, but some of them, I don't get very good germination. And some of them that I do get a little bit of germination from, some of the plants aren't that quality. So there are a few varieties and a few different things that I set out to grow this year that I ended up not getting to grow as well too. So, but I hope for all of you that you've gotten to grow and things are growing really well in your gardens. Tell me all about it. Get in the comments section, get in the chat box here if you're live with the show, and let me know what you've got growing on. So I think at this point in time, we are going to jump right into our show and our interviews. We've got a couple of really good interviews from a couple of really great people in Australia, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. We've been doing we did these videos over the last few weeks, And I've already had these conversations, and they're really great conversations. Um, but they are pre-recorded, like I mentioned just a little bit ago. And if you are joining with me here on the show and watching live, just get in the chat box there, and I'll be joining in with all of you here as our interviews get underway here. But we're going to start off with an interview for our channel of the week with a good friend, Marty Ware of Marty's Garden. I mentioned earlier that I've been following his channel and his gardening for several years now. I remember looking up and getting interested in the idea of doing some worm farming and growing some worms and getting some of that vermicompost. It's something that I'm still working on, actually, but I found his channel years ago, looking into all of that, and it's been following him ever since. So let's check out our interview with Marty Ware.
Hi, my name is Nathan.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm Rachel.
So, all right, everybody, let's welcome Marty Ware to the show. Hey, Marty, welcome to Let's Get Growing. Thanks for joining with us here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a real honor to be on.
Excellent. Yes, really great to have you here with us for our Australian show. And, just right off the top, where exactly in Australia are you gardening out of?
I live actually in the Byron Shire, so right on the Queensland border, the most easterly point of Australia. And I've been just moved from the mid-north coast back home because I'm from here originally. And I'm loving it. It's basically a subtropical climate, and I live pretty close to the beach, so we don't get any frosts and things like that. So, yeah, look, I'm spoiled. I can grow all year round.
That is awesome. Yeah, I get real jealous of everybody who gets to be able to do that, and that's really cool. Well, and again, thank you for joining with us. And how about letting the audience know just a little bit about you and what you got growing on there in Australia?
Okay. Well, firstly, I'm an agricultural horticulturist. I studied agricultural business in the just before the year, around about year 2000, let's say, and been in and out of doing this since then. And it's, I actually was micro farming before then, but really when I started getting my qualifications and things, because I was run over on a motorbike and I couldn't walk and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, what can I do to better myself? And then it really sort of went from there, where it exploded and really got my interest. I really started studying in the organic side of things, Australian native foods, organics, avocados was my main area that I worked in. And I worked on, my thesis was on a small space, like a 1 acre urban garden, because I could sort of see that coming up into the future. I thought the farms are going to get smaller and urban gardening is going to be a big thing. And so I sort of headed down that direction and really been interested in the small space stuff, even though I'm on quite a big block now. I've predominantly been a small space farmer, gardener, and well, many people know me as a worm farmer, really.
Yeah, that's where I actually discovered you and your channel several years back, as I was looking more into the idea of doing some worm farming myself. And so, of course, with everything else that I've done as I got started with gardening, 12, 13 years ago, I jumped immediately onto YouTube so that I could learn just a little bit more from other people who had experiences. And when I was looking up worms and worm farming, I consistently saw your videos being suggested by the YouTube algorithm. So that's where immediately I got connected with you and your channel and been kind of following along ever since.
Done a lot of them. I don't do as many now. I still do them, but I don't do as many now. I'm doing more sort of urban small space. Well, not small space as far as permaculture goes, because my yard's not that big. I'm not like on a small farm or anything like that. I'm on a large urban block. So sort of more of that sort of urban permaculture homestead stuff, but I still use worms on my very day. I was just out feeding them just before we come in. Yeah, so they grow great this time of year because they love the cool weather, and so at the moment I'm in full breeding zone. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, too, that's the thing with the being on the opposite side of the globe like we are. You're heading towards winter, and I am as already again dealing with some really nice hot weather here as we're moving into summertime as well too. But real quick, just on the worm farming subject though too, what what do you really find the value or the when it comes to worm farming?
I think the value really is when we first start. We can, it takes about 3 months to really get going once you first get your first worm farm. But
Hmm.
then once you really start seeing the expansion and you're getting your own free, like you're turning that edibles that you're eating that you normally would throw in a green waste bin or into a
Yeah,
compost bin, you can also throw it into a worm farm and turn it into an amendment that can be fed to the garden. It's very good for all plants because it doesn't have any smell. And really, once you get it going, they're basically running for free near the end there. Just, you got to have a bit of bedding sort of, and just, take care of them. They are a farm, so you got to take care of them. People leave them alone. They're pretty tough. You can leave them for quite a long time on their own and they
yeah,
will survive. But if you want them to thrive, you take care of them. So you can get liquids from them that you can put on the plants. And also, you can collect worm castings at different stages, or the compost coming out at different stages to
yeah,
feed plants. And it's a very cheap way to do it. And that's why I first got started in
yeah,
it. Probably, we're looking at 14 years ago now when I think I got my first worm farm. And it took me a while to get going because you didn't have the YouTube videos around and all that type of stuff then. But the more I did it, the more I could see the value. And I was just like, I was quite poor then, single dad, raising a little child on my own. She was only a couple of years old,
yeah,
and growing my food on the veranda in a small space. And I had my own liquids, and I could take the, when I was growing seedlings, I could grab the castings out and mix it with a bit of compost or a bit of stuff that I bought from the shop, say some organic potting mix or things like that. And I was noticing how much healthier the plants were. And then, as I sort of learnt more about it, become friends with a local worm farmer, I was learning more about it and seeing the benefits of like how it actually protects the roots and actually like increases the biology in the soil and the plants. There wasn't a lot of information, even though it's been around for a long time. The technology had never been there to sort of do the testing and everything, but now they know that it just really is amazing stuff, and probably so good that people use too much at one time. You only need about 10% mixed into your pots and things like that. But when you're using it, the liquids is what you get the most out of. If you get your farm successful, you can really the right time of year, you can collect liquid every day to put on your
yeah.
onto your plant. So it's a big way. I think if we're going to describe the biggest benefit would be the money saving side of things, which is really huge
Yeah.
now because inflation and all that. Right? We need to save every penny.
That's right, exactly. And that, yeah. So, and worm farming, growing your own worms, even if it's just kind of a small, worm system that you have for your garden, does provide that kind of really ultimately a big value for your garden, because it really is. Vermicompost is really like one of those really great fertilizers, really natural, really organic. It goes a long way. Like you said, you don't need as much as you would think. And,
Yep.
and again, too, you talk about the liquids, and you're probably talking just about some of the what leaches from it all, but you can also make like worm teas. Do you make worm
Yeah.
teas as well?
Yeah, I probably a good way to explain that, because there's a lot of controversy about it. And look, and I've even had some arguments with some YouTubers about it.
Hmm.
But like they just have their own. I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong here, but I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time with professional worm farmers, and been doing this for a very long time. And the leachate is actually the material, the liquid that's seeping through. Say, for example, you threw some tomatoes in and it's breaking down, the juices seeping through and moving
Hmm.
through the system and coming out the bottom. Well, that's more what you would call leachate, that sort of breaking down and the juice moving
Yeah.
through it. And that can be very high in sort of bad bacteria and things like that. And so that really isn't the best stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to use a lot of, and this is where the controversy falls into place and where the arguments fall into place, but they're not what I believe, because I've developed my own systems, is they're not doing it properly. And this is where the argument sort of comes into place. They're still getting the castings, but they're not taking advantage of getting the really good juice. And when you have, so the professional worm farmers, they have vats. Now, there'll be a big tall vat that sort of works on gravity fed, right? And so you put a good quality rainwater into a whole lot of castings that's had the eggs and everything, the cocoons and worms taken out, and they compress it, right? And compress it and compress it and compress it until eventually it's all gone through. And then they take the liquid and they highly oxygenate it and take the liquid out of the bottom and bottle it and sell it. That's basically the basics to it. There's a bit more to it. So before I found that out, I was actually thought, hang on. When I found that out, I was like, oh, I'm getting it pretty close with my own systems. And if you're getting the bedding right, so they flow the water, you can pour the water in, a good quality rainwater or something with no fluoride, chlorine in it, and it flows through quickly and then comes out through the bottom. So you could say you could get a bucket in 10 minutes, right? So that's how quick it's flowing out. Highly oxygenated, you pour it up and down in a few different buckets. And then what it's done is it's actually gone through the system and it's picked up all the sides of the castings. It actually even grabs, and now this is a bit of a secret, it actually grabs around the mucous membrane of the worm. Now, I know this because Australian Technologies, where they're the leaders in this, and it actually grabs a bit of the good bacteria off the side of the worm as well, and the biology that's sitting on the side of it, you know, and moves down through into the water. And so this produces all these different nutrients that I don't even know the words for, basically, unless I want to become a soil scientist, start testing everything and go crazy like that. But that's not me. I just want to see the results and go, wow, hey, that's doing really good. That's growing really great.
Where along the lines of doing the things and your experience did you decide that, you know, I'm going to take my gardening skills to YouTube and start teaching people about the things that you've learned?
Sorry about that. The phone was beeping, so I just threw it further distance. I didn't turn it off, so excuse me for that.
That's definitely a good one way to handle it.
Threw it as far as I could. So yeah, the question was the YouTube side of things, of how I got started there. Is that what you're asking? Right. Okay. So I was living in Southeast Asia in Thailand, and I come back with my my daughter and partner then, and we ended up. I was just living with, basically taking care of my daughter in an apartment, and up on near the Gold Coast, Tweed Heads area, so still subtropical sort of thing, and didn't really have any land, and I was like, oh, how do I actually start saving some money here? And I grew my own food anyway most of the time. I didn't when I was in Thailand, but when I got back, I started again pretty much straight away. And then all of a sudden there was this YouTube sort of thing, and I was like, this is sort of fun. And we just had these old handy cam stuff, and oh man, the cameras and everything, sound and microphones, everything was terrible, but it was sort of fun. And I was just sort of doing it just for a bit of a hobby. And then they started sort of taking off, a lot of small space videos, and I had a website. So before I was doing the YouTube stuff, I had a website called Small Apartment Gardening Homes, and that was really popular. I'd already had quite a big presence online for blogging, and that was getting around about I think about anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 views a day, sort of thing. And so I started producing these YouTube videos, and then that would people would produce these videos and send them back to the websites, right? Because we didn't know what was going on with YouTube. It was just a little marketing thing to send people back to your website so you could make a bit of money. And I used to make a little bit of money from my website. And then YouTube was growing a little bit more and more, and I was noticing I was getting more of an audience. And I was like, oh, wow. And then one day YouTube contacted me and said, this is before Google bought it, and said, would you like to monetize your channel? We'll give you, I think it was 55% of all this, you know. I was just like, yeah, well, why not? I'm doing it anyway. And then it sort of just grew from there, like, I don't know, like depending on the direction you want me to go, I could talk too long on it. You know what I mean? But that was basically where it started, just small space gardening, growing a heap of food on a little veranda and showing people how I did it. And my daughter was involved. Occasionally she'd sing a little song or water some pot plants for a little pot plant and stuff. It was really fun. And it was showing what I was doing. So I was documenting my life at the same time. And I quite liked that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the same reasons for me though too, in starting all of that, as well as small space gardening. And we were talking a little bit about that before we got started recording and all of that. That's one of my bigger passions. Is kind of what we do here on the Urban Gardener channel, is talk about all the different variations of growing your own food in small spaces and all of that. But one of the things I wanted to touch on though too is, I saw one of your videos recently, and you were just really talking a lot about the importance of growing your own food, especially now.
Right.
There's a lot of things going on economically around the world. Obviously, both of us, I'm in the US, you're in Australia. We're seeing similar things going on. You want to talk a little bit more about that and kind of what you were discussing in that video a little bit?
Okay, so probably for the last 6 months, I've been sort of talking about that topic, but I just noticed, there's some people that take a positive spin on it. There's some people that go for the, I guess, the fear factor of it as well. And that can produce, I don't know, how do I put it in those words? But a lot of people are taking advantage of these times to just get views. And I didn't really want to do that, because my whole thing on my channel has always been, just sharing my life and the progression of where I go in the growing of food, and so that's probably why we're only, it hasn't really become it's fairly, I call it successful for what it is. But the reason it hasn't become as big as, say, some other channels that have been around as long. But for now, I'm always concerned about people. I want to help. I'm a bit like Mike Van Doozy. He likes to help people. Me and Mike, we're really great friends, and we discuss about this quite regularly, and we've talked about this topic. And for now, the video that you're talking about would be why it's the most important time in the last 100 years. Yeah. And if I'm a bit of a history buff, right? And I look back at the monetary systems going back, 400 or 500 years, also agricultural systems going back, say, 400 or 500 years. The development of all these different ways of farming, and the way and how money is worked in agriculture and things. So it's just a nerdy thing for me to do. And so if we look at the way that history is moving at the moment, you can't really see. There are some similarities of say these 80-year to 120-year patterns that of the falling of currencies and changing over of currencies and changing over world leaders and these type of things. And how they roll. And there's some things that we've, if we look at the financial bubble, we're in these like 4 bubbles at the moment, and they're quite big ones, and everything's sort of popping around us. And so, I look at it this way going, hey, there's, things we need. We need shelter, we need food, we need shelter, food and clothing. And, obviously some people will love us, and for me, I'm a Christian man, so I really believe in sort of, just keeping my faith strong and, knowing I'm taken care of. But at the same time, we can see these things happening. And if we protect ourselves with one of the, some of these items, and one of them is growing food, and, like, say, for example, you get, what do they call it? Hyperinflation. Now, hyperinflation affects food dramatically, right? Yep. And in some countries, you've only got to look at the history of some countries where it's hit hyperinflation, and they're paying, their dollars just lost so much value so quickly that they can't even fill up their kitchen cupboard with the amount of money, because the value's taken off quicker than what it can. Now, I'm not saying it's going to get to that. We always hope it doesn't, but during this type of transition, I think if we can have some of our own food, even if it's only 10, 20%, we're not only going to end up with a better quality of food. We end up with a better quality of life, and
Mhm.
overall more money in our pocket. And we can do other things with it to keep our quality of life. And so most of us look at time as our system of pay. And, like when I'm growing my food, I'm looking at it going, okay, I'm going to grow this, and this to produce that type of food for this season. And these are the recipes that I'm going to get out of it. And so I might have cucumber and tomato on my toast in the mornings, say, for example, and I've picked the cucumber and tomatoes. I might have a little bit of cheese or something, some avocado. So I've bought, if I haven't grown the avocado, I've just bought the cheese and the toast, and the rest is sort of like, I'm going, hey, well, that's money in my pocket. What can I pick for lunch now, sort of thing?
Yeah.
And then think about these recipes, what's growing. And you'd be surprised over like a period of quite a long time how much money you can save, because in business, it's all about spending less, right? And producing more. And in history, when you spend less and produce more, every country's done really well and every household's done really well. I, from a young boy, watched the Italians move into my street. They had 20 people living in a house. A year later, they're buying another house up the road. In 5 years, they own 5 houses in the street. They just pulled together and pulled this time, and they're all out gardening, family stuff and all this. And I'm like, these guys are smart. Start learning what they know what to do. And so now I think that's for us to pull together, think more like a homesteader. Hopefully I'm not getting too far off track here, but now I believe like we've gone out of that 80s to the year 2000, 2010 period. The baby boom period is gone. It's a transition. And yeah, I think it really is the most important time in our history of lives. I'm 55 now. From what I've seen, I would say more than ever.
So, again, I think that's really great. I think the message that you share and you do and all the experience you have on your channel is really awesome. And that's why we wanted to bring you onto the program, to be able to introduce you to, to our audience and to talk about some of these sort of things. And what I would like to end with here real quick is just kind of give you a chance to talk about what you got going on next and what's happening with your channel and where everybody can find you and all that sort of great stuff.
Yeah, cool. So hopefully I didn't go on too long. Some of those things I'm quite passionate about. Some things I talk about but hopefully people got some value of what I've said so far. But yeah, Marty's Garden is the name of my channel. I've had a bit of a break in the last 4 to 6 months. I haven't been doing a lot, but just producing a few videos sort of here and there. I've been working on some other projects, but we're just about to kick off again and doing some homesteading sort of stuff. So mixing sort of like everything from container gardening to small space permaculture, organics, and sort of moving along those lines and keeping it really simple and showing people how they can grow something. And then we're hoping that we can turn it into like somewhere we can direct you to a recipe, or we show you something simple, what you can do to your food, or give you just some concepts. Like what I spoke about before is, those herbs that we were talking about before. So I might show you how to grow some parsley and, or show you some of these herbs and go, okay, well, how do we go and pick the tomatoes and then turn that into a nice sauce that we're going to put on some pasta or something that night, and just show our experience of how it can be done and taking it along that sort of homesteady sort of feel. So I'm hoping that it's going to, we don't know until we sort of test it with my audience, but I'm hoping that people will really like that type of content.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure everybody will. I think you're really awesome at what you do. I really enjoy your videos and your passion for gardening and sharing all of your experience and everything too. And again, thank you so much for joining with us here on the Let's Get Growing show. And again, I encourage everybody who's watching the program, get down in the description below, find a link to Marty's channel, go check out all of his really great videos. Thanks again, Marty.
Thank you very much. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Bye for now.
Awesome. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Ivory Organic All-Purpose Fertilizers offer your plants everything they need to have the most productive, fruitful, and longest-lasting lives. For all plants, including your fruit trees, vegetables, ornamentals, and roses and flowers, in-ground or potted plants, young and established, the 6 macronutrients that all plants need. Macronutrients are those elements that plants need in abundance and include nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. Nitrogen helps with the greening of the plants and the growth. Phosphorus for abundance of flowers and fruits, plus drought tolerance. Potassium is for disease resistance, root development, and strength. Magnesium is the heart of the chlorophyll molecule, which is responsible for photosynthesis, converting waters and carbon dioxide with light energy into sugar molecules. Sulfur helps green pale plants turn dark green and necessary for optimal plant metabolic processes. And calcium, the building block of all plant cell walls. Ivory Organic All-Purpose Fertilizers have it all in both the Super and Premium Blend products. The Super Blend simply has a higher percentage of the macronutrients plus azomite, which is derived from volcanic ash deposits, to offer your plants many of the micronutrients too. The product can be applied to the soil or as a foliar feed and even as a supplement to your compost tea. Ivory Organic All-Purpose Fertilizers are organic, effective, USA-made products to maximize the productivity, health, and life of all plants and trees. Keep growing with Ivory Organics, and wishing you all happy gardening.
So, all right, awesome interview there with Marty Ware. Just really great discussion with him. Again, it's really one of the fun things about doing this show is getting to talk to all of these great people that I've, got to watch and view for all of these years, and to be able to have a show of my own, to be able to invite them on and have these discussions, be able to share it all with you is just such a pleasure. It's really awesome. So again, thank you all so much for joining with us here for the conversation. And I do want to also say once again too, to show some support to Marty Ware and Marty's Garden. Go down in the description below. Check out one of the links to his channel. Check out some of his videos. Go subscribe, and yeah, show him some support from the Let's Get Growing viewers. And yeah, just again, really great stuff that he's got going on there. And really glad to have had him on the show with us today. Again, we got another great conversation coming up here real soon. I did just want to kind of go over last week. I talked about bringing back the question of the week, and I did bring that up. I did decide to go ahead and push that ahead one more week. So we will have a question of the week up in our group, the Let's Get Growing group. It's on Facebook. There is a link to that as well down below in the description. And that's where you can join all of the gardeners in the Let's Get Growing community and share your gardening experience, help others out with their garden experience. Just a really great community. We have some really awesome gardeners sharing some of the really great things that they're growing. And that's also where we do post things for the show, like our question of the week that we'll have coming up this next week. So be sure to join the group and let us know, what is your favorite tomato variety? What's your favorite tomato variety? It is that time of year. We're all growing our tomatoes, and it's one of the more popular crops for people to grow in their gardens. So I know we all have our favorites. We're all trying some new ones. So let me know, what is your favorite tomato variety? What are some of those ones that you grow each and every year? And maybe even throw in there some new varieties that you're trying this year as well too. So go check out that post at our group on Facebook, at the Let's Get Growing Facebook gardening group, and then join with us this next week, and we will talk all about our favorite tomato varieties and the different tomatoes that we're growing in our gardens this year. And really looking forward to all of that. I do have some really cool tomato varieties that I'm growing this year, and I'm always growing something new. I'm always trying new varieties. I make sure I have several that are new each year, but I do have some mainstays that I grow each and every year because they are the best as far as I'm concerned. And as I find new ones, we just kind of add them to that, that group of mainstays that we grow each year. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about what your favorite tomato varieties are as well too. You can also just answer the question down below in the comment section as well too. So I'll check all the comments and see about that. We'll talk about those on our show this next week. So we're going to keep everything rolling right along here with our conversations from our great guests from Australia. And our next guest, I've been looking forward to doing this interview for quite a while. In fact, when I first started thinking about this show, I was going to get it started maybe a year beforehand, and I had a list of people that I wanted to get on and have a discussion with, and this person was on that list because one of the things I wanted to offer with this show and our discussions and the different guests that we have is a variety of different people, authors, podcasters, different people doing different things in the gardening world. And so I wanted to have someone representing music when it came to gardening and all of that. And I've been following this band called Formidable Vegetable out of Australia. And they, got some really great fun music videos. They put out several different albums, all sorts of music having to do with permaculture and sustainable living and just all sorts of great stuff. I saw a TED Talk with Charlie Mgee, our guest, and just really loved his passion for what he was doing, not only in music, but also in teaching people about gardening and growing their own food and all that as well too. So he's definitely someone we had to have on the show. And we finally got him here this week. Again, a pre-recorded interview, but let's go check out that interview and some music too, mind you. We've included some music videos and all of that. So we'll start with checking out a few different bits of music of theirs, and then we'll jump right into that interview. And again, I'll be in the comment section there too as well. So be sure to jump in the comment section. And I hope you enjoyed the interview.
Why mine gas seems silly to me when you can make your own from the comfort of your throne with a methane digester. Oh yes.
Making a pledge to acknowledge the edge, grow some veg, stack it on the ledge. In the here and now, make sure to earn something in return. Here, let me show you how.
Well, one thing's for certain, that's that nothing's for certain. You never know what's around the bend. In whatever you're dealing, just accept what you're feeling. Change is there, make the most of it. You might as well use it for your benefit. Like when your food goes bad, just compost it. And when there's no more planes, build a pirate ship and sail the sea.
So, all right, let's welcome into the show Charlie Mgee of Formidable Vegetable Band in Australia. Charlie, it's really great to have you with us, joining with us on the show. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Yeah, really great to have you here. And again, as I mentioned to you before we got started here, that I've been following around with you for many years, and I just really think it's really cool what you do. I've watched some of your different shows and videos and different things over the years, and I think it's just really great how you take the gardening and permaculture world into music, and what you do with your band is just really awesome. So when we thought of this whole show and the concept, we were like, we got to get this guy Charlie on our show and talk about music and gardening and permaculture and all that. So again, really glad to have you with us here today.
Oh, it's awesome to be here, and it's been a while since I've been over to the States. But yeah, the last time I was over there was in San Diego for the big Permaculture Voices conference, and it was great to be able to play, to people who got it, to the gardeners and the designers and the people trying to make a change in their community. So yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. But let's get started with kind of how some of your history and some of where did you grow up in Australia there?
I'm from a tiny little town in the southwest corner called Pemberton, and it's I mean, people think of Australia as being this dry, desolate continent, right? And most of it is. We have the lowest rainfall in the world. It's pretty barren out there, but actually there's a whole lot of really biodiverse and lush ecosystems, and I was really lucky to grow up in one of the most beautiful forests of Australia, and it's the Karri Forest in the southwest, which there's trees like I don't know what you'd convert 80 meters to, like meters, feet, huge trees, but
Right.
yeah, and so it was a real forest kind of area. My dad was really interested in gardening and growing food, and wanted to give us kids a sustainable life, or a taste of sustainability and living off grid and being self-sufficient. So he actually built a little mud brick shack in the forest, using mud and clay from the soil around us, and also recycled junk from the tip that he found. He was a single parent working a full-time job, so he didn't have a lot of cash, and I think the two balanced up pretty well. But yeah, he built us this little shack, and then we had our veggie garden, our chickens, and our rainwater tank, and everything was pretty much, a self-sufficient kind of closed loop. And as well as that, he loved his compost. He'd compost everything right down to the waste in the toilet. So, it was pretty different upbringing to even most people in Australia. I mean, kids at school would sort of look at me and be like, "What? Like, how do you live?" And we didn't have power. They're like, "You don't have a TV? Like, what do you do?" It's like, "What do you mean? I hang out in the garden and I play with my chickens and I, go for walks in the forest." Like, it was looking back at it, it was a really special way to grow up. And I think that kind of gave me that perspective to do what I do now.
Yeah, I'm sure for a lot of kids, like even, kids living in modern time, or even back when I was young and all that, would probably look at that pretty strangely and be like, how can you do this? How can you live like that? But if you had the opportunity, like you said, and then you get older, you can really look back and appreciate all of those sort of things that you were able to get from that and gain from that. I mean, I wish I could have. I didn't have that quite, of a upbringing, but I would look, I look back and go, man, that would be great if I could have experienced that when I was a kid. I would have loved it.
A lot of kids now don't get that opportunity, and it's kind of devastating because they talk about things like nature deficit disorder and stuff, where kids are literally indoors for too much and they don't have enough connection with nature. But the beautiful thing about gardening is that that's the place where we can connect ourselves to nature in almost any circumstance. Like even having some plants inside. Having that connection is so important. And I guess I was really lucky to experience that, in full immersion. And actually, before my dad built the mud brick shack, we actually lived in the north of Australia in Arnhem Land, which is one of the most remote parts of the country. And we lived in Aboriginal communities. And I was a little tiny toddler running around with other kids in the community, just completely free range, and got that experience as well of actually being a part of the community with, these Indigenous kids who just sort of had the freedom to roam around, and all the parents were kind of keeping an eye on everyone, but everyone was responsible. So it was that sense of community as well that kind of came together with that connection to nature that really informed a lot of what I'm into, which is gardening, but also permaculture, which is kind of a different thing as well. So I'll go into that later on.
Yeah, we'll talk about that here in just a minute. I want to. So, when you were growing up, those were basically your first gardens. Then you were getting a lot of real garden experience at a young age. Then, right?
Oh, look, one of my earliest memories is because we lived in the tropics when we were up in the north, and it's the opposite to you guys. That north is hot and south is cold.
Right. Exactly.
But I remember sitting under this giant papaya tree and bananas, like sort of hanging down around me, and there was, rain sort of falling gently in this warm tropical climate, and it was just like the memories are always kind of a little bit, different to the reality. But for me, it just felt like this sort of Garden of Eden. My dad had grown this garden, and in a couple of years, it had turned into a complete jungle. And that's one of my earliest memories, is just sitting in this garden surrounded by food. And, that's always stuck with me because I've been trying to recreate it ever since.
Right. So some real good hands-on education and learning about growing things and doing all of that right from a young age, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what you got to do. We've got to get the kids into it because kids get it too. Every kid that I've come across who, I've played some songs about earthworms too, or, about soil microbes or planting stuff, they hone right in and they understand what you're talking about, and they want to go and do it. And that's why, school gardening and just gardening and planting with kids is so important, because even though they might not, have the technical skills or abilities, like they really understand. And I guess, having that experience, like I really absorbed a lot, even from a young age, and it pays off down the track, I tell you.
Yeah, definitely. I have heard from someone before that, you teach a kid to grow a tomato, they'll eat a tomato. You get a lot of kids who push back from vegetables or, and that sort of thing. But, if you actually get your hands in the ground and you grow those things yourself, you're more willing to actually eat them and enjoy them and all of that, and I totally agree when it comes to gardening education and just a growing education that we've already had as a guest for one of our channel of the weeks just a few this last season was a young kid named Nathan, and he's got a channel that him and his father do, Growing with Nathan. And it's just all about this young kid who's learning about growing, and they've got a community garden they go to, and and he gets involved in doing all this sort of stuff, and you can just really see how much that he really enjoys all aspects of it too, by getting that experience. Plus, and I'm sure you had the same sort of situation for yourself too, is that he gets this really kind of a closer relationship with his father, over being able to work that together and do those sort of things together, and him learning all these different things that way.
Yeah. And you really you learn as well from kids doing it too, because I don't have
Yes.
my own, but I've hung out with plenty of my friends' kids and just like done gardening with them and seen how they explore stuff that you kind of take for granted, or maybe you haven't even realized. And a friend of mine was I was teaching him how to plant sweet potato, and he was right into chopping off a bit of the sweet potato and putting it in water and watching the roots grow. And then he went and planted it, and then pretty soon all around the house things just started popping out of the ground. And his mum was sitting on the veranda one day and being like, "Where did those beans come from? There's just some beans climbing up the veranda." And he was 2 years old. He goes, "Oh, I planted." It's like,
Right. Oh, that's
just
great.
went off and did it of his own accord. So, it really is, don't underestimate the next generation of
That's
gardeners.
right. Even for me though, that kind of brought up a memory I had from when I was a kid too. My mother did a sweet potato, and it grew into this big old plant, and just all of these slips were just growing in this big long out of this whatever container she used there. And I was young. I was probably kindergarten, first grade, and I thought it was just the coolest thing ever that I ended up having to take it to school for like one of those show and tell type things. They're like, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And, and it was because of my mother. I've always had a fascination for, growing indoor plants, lots of house
I can
plants and
tell.
that sort of stuff.
You're definitely outgrowing me right here. But
Yeah.
this is actually house sitting this place, so I can't claim any credit for it. But funny, you should mention the sweet potato. Actually, it was a sweet potato that like catapulted me into the world of gardening. And even though I'd grown up around it, and my dad was always trying to kind of get me out of the garden, like when you're a kid, you kind of you don't want to do what your parents tell you to do, and you're kind of like, oh, that's boring parent stuff, and you get the best. And I'd come out and help out and do stuff with him, but occasionally I just want to go inside and play video games and do everything that kids want to do. But when I actually left home and moved to the city, and I was like, wow, people live different here. I went around to my sister's place and I was looking for something to eat, and she didn't have a lot of money, so there wasn't a lot of food in the cupboard. But I found this shriveled up old sweet potato that had been in there for who knows how long, and on the end of it, it had this little tendril coming out and a tiny little leaf. And I just had this moment where I was like, okay, this is no good to eat, but I should put you in the ground. You're not happy in the cupboard. And it just sort of was this moment of like, sweet potato, leaf, ground.
Yeah.
Happens. And then that's when the whole back fence just got taken over by sweet potato. And a few weeks later, we were digging out wheelbarrow loads of tubers. And it was just this quantum leap from like, oh, all this stuff that I grew up around, I can do it myself. And so there's that quantum leap, I suppose, that you have to make where you just sort of experiment and try something out. And so giving that foundation to sort of know what to do is part of the, part of what we do.
Yeah, it took me many, many years later in my life to really understand the concept of what that sweet potato was actually doing. I just had more of a fascination that it was growing. It was this big plant, and it came from a potato that we got at the store, so I thought that was really cool. Yeah, exactly. And then I remember my first plant, which is kind of just right behind me here, was a spider plant. And they grow all these little babies that come down there. And I remember my mother had one of those. And so I remember I took one of those and planted it in my own soil and grew this plant out all on my own too. And, just kind of following along with watching what she was doing and learning from that sort of stuff. But
you're like a mad scientist, hey? It's like, I can clone my own plants.
I can do this myself. I see what she's doing there. I could do this myself. So yeah, that's awesome. And again, I just I really agree that teaching kids and learning and growing more gardening education, more school gardens and things like that, however we can influence kids and all that sort of stuff too. But what you do is really, really awesome in the whole aspect of making these fun songs and this music and everything that kids can really enjoy, and make that connection through music as well too. I think there's one thing I read that you say that music is more than entertainment.
Yeah. And, traditionally cultures around the world have used music as like a foundational part of their culture. And, you just got to look at any majority world country, that it's still being used. Like all over Africa, people get out and they sing work songs while they work, and they get stuff done, and they teach each other through music. And, we in Western culture, we get a little bit of that at school with like the ABCs and, a little few sort of maths times tables or something. But then after that, it kind of disappears, and it's not embedded in this modern Western culture that we live in. And I was like, why not? Because music is like one of the most enjoyable and efficient ways to learn. And when I was doing my permaculture course, I kind of had this moment again where I put two and two together. We were learning about pattern languages, and a pattern language is just anything that, it's a language that forms a pattern. So music has a rhythm and a melody and, all of those elements that your brain recognizes as a pattern. And we're really open to remembering and learning using patterns. If you kind of give someone a breakdown of statistics on a piece of paper and, hand it to them, they're not going to absorb it. It's going to take years or possibly never to actually be able to remember that stuff. But if you kind of take that and you put it into a pattern, i.e. a song or a story or a piece of artwork or something, then suddenly everyone can remember it, and everyone can sing along, from little kids right up to adults. And, they don't have to necessarily remember every little detail, but it's the overall pattern that they remember. And so I was learning about this in my permaculture course, thinking, wow, like I can do that. I can write songs and I can do permaculture now. So why don't I put the two together? And that's where the idea came from, to write an album about the permaculture principles. And again, permaculture is different to just gardening, because again, it's a broader pattern. It's about, we're going to grow a garden. Why? Oh, because it gives us food, and it benefits the ecosystem, and it creates biodiversity, and it's good for the community, and it's sort of like thinking outside the box. So the music was just that. It was really sort of trying to think outside the box of gardening and music, and by doing that, sort of putting them together, it just seemed to work.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you said that unfortunately you've got your ukulele in the shop at the moment. So I think what we should do real quick here is take a look at one of your songs that you performed live at a show a little while back ago.
We're here to sing to you about things like permaculture, growing veggies, being nice to people, and all the good things that make the world a better place to live in. And one of my favorite things is the humble sweet potato. Here's a little love song off our new album, Grow Do It. A one, two, three. You're my sweet potato, sweet potato, sweet potato. I'm gonna eat you later, eat you later, eat you later. You know dud spud under mud, you're unrelated. Yeah, you're my sweet potato. Well, I see you being all shriveled in my cupboard. Let me put you in the garden bed, I think you'll love it. Gonna leave you underground until you make another little sweet potato, sweet potato. Well, you're a ground cover, mound lover, drought tougher. You're my sound brother. Gonna dig you, wash you, cook you, eat you for my supper. My little sweet potato, sweet potato. Yeah, you're my sweet potato, sweet potato, sweet potato. I'm gonna eat you later, eat you later, eat you later. You're my kind of dynamic accumulator. My little sweet Alex Swanson. Oh yeah, now I'm gonna pluck your leafy tips. I'm gonna cut you into chips. Maybe whip me up some dip. My little sweet potato. Yeah, you're my sweet potato, sweet potato, sweet potato. I'm gonna eat you later, eat you later, eat you later. You're my savior with the flavor that I wanna savor. My little sweet, my sweet. You're my sweet potato, sweet potato, sweet potato. I'm gonna eat you later, eat you later, eat you later. Than a regular potato, you are so much greater, my little sweet, my sweet, my sweet potato. Oh yeah.
Hope everybody else is enjoying our interview here with Charlie. I wanted to kind of step back just a little bit and talk a little bit more about growing and doing that stuff we had mentioned before. You were growing with your father and in this really kind of unique lifestyle when you were young and all of that. So as you're learning about and growing, and what are some of those things that like in the garden or in that you're growing and all of that you really enjoy the most, when you're out there, or maybe even now too, not necessarily when you were a kid, but what are some of those things you really enjoy most when you're out there?
I really get a kick out of seed saving, because I don't think enough people do seed saving, right? We go out and we buy our seeds, or we buy our starts, and we plant the garden, and then we eat the food. But then, the way to close the loop there is to actually save the seed and do it again. And you know, it's a little bit of a worry because they reckon, you know, with the whole biodiversity loss thing, that we're actually losing the biodiversity of our food as well as of you know, other living things on the planet. And saving seed is one way to increase that biodiversity and to get more local varieties that are suited to our area. So if you have a tomato that does really well and it doesn't get diseases and it grows really good fruit, you know, you save the biggest and the best, and then, you know, save that seed and grow it again next year. You're going to have an appropriate tomato for your particular plot, and also something to share with your neighbors, because, you know, you don't get just one seed, you get hundreds or thousands or, you know, millions, depending on how much you do. So I love that idea, and I still do, of that abundance that you get from seed saving. And I think that's where it's kind of like alchemy almost. You know, you grow something, you've got a limited size of the garden bed and, you know, a limited amount of space and a limited amount of energy, but a plant produces so much more than we can possibly ever hope to use or grow again ourselves. So you have to share it. And it's sort of that regenerative abundance that, you know, that then creates like its own economy. Like I just keep imagining, you know, like thought experiment. What if money was seeds? And then, you know, like everyone grew enough for themselves and then they had more to give away. Like eventually, like what kind of economy would that be? You know, if everyone had enough to give, and all we had to do was select the varieties that you know, someone else didn't have or someone else wanted, and just do a swap, and then it would just grow this sense of abundance and you know, in our communities, which I think in reality is actually how the planet kind of wants to be. You know,
exactly.
nature, and that's what it does. Forests regenerate in that way, and a tree spews out thousands of seeds, and, you know, some grow, some get taken to other places, but there's this absolute surplus that you know, really can be a source of abundance for us as well as for the soil and for the ecosystems in general. So I actually visited an amazing activist called Vandana Shiva a few years ago. She's a farmer and a seed saving advocate and you know, activist.
I've been lucky enough to meet Vandava.
But she's amazing. I actually met her at an heirloom convergence in California a few years ago, and I got up and played a song about seeds, and she just happened to walk in at the right time. And then a few months later, I got an invite to India to her farm to play at a festival.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
wow, okay. So, you know, the work she does around seed saving and working with small farmers to save traditional heirloom seeds is amazing and so important, because in India, a lot of the food comes from traditional, you know, heirloom plants that people have been growing for thousands of years. And recently, big seed companies have come in and tried to say, hey, use our seeds, they're better, and you have to pay a fee, but they'll be better.
Right.
And, you know, you have to put this chemical on them, but they'll still be better. And farmers have found themselves, you know, losing that autonomy and that ability to save their own seed and have that sustainable food system. So, you know, she's actually going and working with farmers to save all this seed and redistribute it, and just something so simple as a seed can just have such a huge effect, whether you're a farmer or a gardener or whatever. So
that's, you know, like you're saying, you know, it's one of the, I think was a real fascination for me as I really started getting into growing food and doing all of that too, was the idea that, you know, you grow these things, and some you know you harvest, but if you leave some behind, you let them grow and go to seed, and then you can harvest that seed and then grow that again. You know, that was a real big mind opener for me at the time when I was, you know, in my first early gardens. You know,
and if you don't want to grow it again, give it to your neighbor and they can grow it instead, and then get it off them the next season you do want to grow it.
Exactly.
Like
and then again too. Yep. And similar to what you're saying too, and the idea of heirlooms, you know, heirlooms and passing these on, and, you know, in similar, you know, areas where they're going to grow really well. But a lot of those things are saved by people and have been saved for generations and generations, and they create these stories along the way. You know, we just had with us this last season, Jared Gettle of the Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company.
Yeah, I saw that one. He's great.
And And yes, just and that was just one of the real importance for him in developing his company and making it based around the idea of heirloom seeds, is to pass those stories on, and to, and to create newer generations of growing these seeds that have been around for so long and doing
I'm
that.
still growing his carbon tomatoes. They're great.
Yeah, a lot of my stuff in my garden I grow from Baker Creek, and
Yeah.
again, I love everything they do, and even going back to the idea of education and school education, their heirloom exposition in California, which I
Mm,
think you might have been mentioning
that
there,
was the
that
one. Yeah.
yeah, that Vandana goes to. Uh, is the purpose of that whole festival is to not only bring people together around food and around all the different heirloom seeds and all these different things, is also to teach kids. Their all of their money and their profits for those festivals goes to those local school gardens and school garden projects and all of that too. So again, people who kind of walk the walk, when it comes to the, ideals behind some of these things, and the importance of seeds and seed saving and passing those things on is probably one of the biggest things we can do. I
Yeah.
also had a uh, I'll just say I also had another guest on this last season named Bevan Cohen, and he's written some books on seed saving and the importance of seed saving and passing on those stories. It really is one of those real important things that we can do as gardeners, is to save some seeds, and again, like you said, pass them on to some neighbors, some friends, and some people around you, to be able to kind of grow that whole garden experience.
Yeah, and again, a lot of what we do and our band Formidable Vegetable is kind of to write musical seeds, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We go and plant ideas, and that kind of leads to actual seeds being planted. I just remember this quote. I think it was Confucius or someone said, "If you want to sustain a society for a season, grow rice. If you want to sustain a society for 100 years, grow trees. And if you want to sustain a
Yeah.
society indefinitely, teach children." And that
Yes.
just makes so much sense. And so, yeah, I love getting out and planting and growing and eating and all of the things that you do in a garden. But I think the seeds of knowledge around how to do that and how to get the next generation doing that is just as important, if not more important, to keep doing. Every gardener, like, part of the gardening experience should be to share, not just produce,
Yeah.
but how did you do that? I think
Mhm.
people just naturally want to do that when they're gardeners as well. Like, oh, cool! Like, I did this. Like, I've got to tell someone about it. Like you having a podcast. It's just like it's a part of the process.
It really is, absolutely, and that's just something, I really like doing, when it came down to it. I have some unique gardening spaces I grow in. I mean, I grow along an alleyway. I've got, cement back patio, and I've found all these different kind of methods and ways to be able to utilize these small spaces, so that even people who don't have the traditional in-ground type of space can find ways to grow things and do that. And it's been kind of my purpose since discovering and learning all that stuff for myself, was to share that with other people. And
Mm.
luckily for me, like I said, I live along an alleyway, so I get all these people from my neighborhood and people who come through, just to look and get fascinated with all the sort of things, and that's
Yeah,
just the best. That's just the best thing for me, is as they're coming through, like, hey, check this out, you want to, and help them along, or set them up with some sort of container, or set them up with some seeds or something that I've had, and be able to teach and help them along the way of learning and discovering that same sort of passion for growing things as I have.
gardening people as well as plants.
Exactly.
And
All right.
speaking of interesting spaces, I just got to show you this quickly. I'm currently
Oh,
house
perfect.
sitting for a
Absolutely.
friend in suburban Melbourne, which is one of the biggest cities in Australia.
Uh-oh.
But she harvests 80 kilograms of food. I've lost you. I can't go out there.
Just for a
Can you hear
second
me?
there. I can hear you.
We're back. Well, I was trying to go outside, but it turns out there's no Wi-Fi out there. So I was just saying that the woman who lives here grows 80 kilos of food a year, which
Oh,
is, again, I
wow.
don't know what that is in pounds, but it's a lot.
It's
And
a
she just
lot,
has a
yeah.
tiny suburban backyard. And there's espalier, persimmons, and plums, and strawberries in the undergrowth, and then a
Yeah.
few veggie beds that are pumping out a huge amount of food, and grape trellises. Like, she's just stacked every single function, and the
Love
amount
it.
of food is like, I mean, you can see on the table over there. There is just like that's just yesterday's harvest.
Oh, wow, yes.
So and that's
That's
inner
wonderful.
city Melbourne, which is just a big city in Australia that there's not a lot of land for people to use. So yeah, it's great. You can really just do it anywhere.
You can, and that's I mean, I think one of the I mean, I first started my very first food plant was a cucumber on a balcony in an
Nice.
apartment I lived in, so, and that's where my whole passion for gardening kind of started, in these small spaces. I've always dreamed of having bigger spaces, which actually this year I do have a friend who's letting we're utilizing his front yard. He's got a couple of big 20 by 40 foot spaces, and we're just kind of learning how to do, because I know small spaces, I've never had something so big before. So we're going to try to pump out and grow as much food. And again, too, it's another one of those situations where it's right there on the street. It's right there where everybody can see in the neighborhood, and come by and learn or pick and share whatever we have growing on there too, is really kind of the whole mission of that opportunity, for sure.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the front yard garden, because it's like a giant billboard at the front that
Mhm.
says, "You can do this too. Check it out. Cucumbers,
Yep.
pumpkins." And it always makes me laugh when people who kind of haven't done that before go, but people might pick it. And it's like, yeah, right.
They might.
Them.
Yeah,
Let them
yeah.
pick it. Let them eat it and enjoy it, and then hopefully they can grow some as well. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I always
I really,
encourage
I'm a
people,
fan
if you
of
have the opportunity to do that, for sure, is to grow it right out front, so where everybody can see it. But here, I'm not sure about Australia, but I know here in America we have a lot of what they call homeowners associations. Now, these are neighborhoods that have like its own little council, and a lot of these sort of places, it's forbidden to grow and do that sort of thing with your front yards. It's got to look, with a nice lawn, and maybe you can have some flowers and things like
right,
that make everything in their mind look pretty, but
because
so
it's
many
about
people.
bringing down the neighborhood.
Yeah, and they don't just don't understand the concept and the idea, and how beautiful actually a place can look when you're growing food right out of your own front yard in those sort of spaces. So
Well, I
hopefully
think
we'll be able to
those
bring that down someday.
there's always room to sort of work the edges. And in permaculture, there's this principle, which is to use the edges and value the marginal. So, in a situation like that, whether there's just like one staunch, traditionalist who doesn't want any edible plants or something that isn't pretty, in the neighborhood, try just like putting something along the edge and then seeing if they notice. And then if it looks beautiful, maybe, hey, check this out. Like, what do you reckon? Hey, try some of my blueberries, like any kind of way. Sort of just work it in, but you always start from the edges. And the thing about starting small is, that's the easiest place to start. If you don't have a space, if you live in an urban apartment in the city, grow a pot of basil on your windowsill, and then pretty soon you can fill up all those spaces. It's all about working the edge. And more, I'm just thinking about that and going like, yes, this is where we've got to go, because not everyone has access to land, and not everyone has the ability or the energy to go big and scale up, which is kind of what we're encouraged to do a lot of the time. It's like, get big or get out. But I mean, like a new album, Microbiome, is all about going small. And the microbiome obviously is to do with your gut and the microorganisms in there, but it's a metaphor for just appreciating the small things. And we've got songs about the soil food web, which of course, has all the microorganisms in the soil that you can't even see. And just all of those small spaces actually have the biggest potential I've been finding. So I'm all about going small.
Yeah. And I completely agree with your whole idea of using the edges, and that sort of thing too. Because again, I grow a lot on these alleyways, and that's all we have, are edges. And you've got to make the most out of these little spaces kind of right alongside of the alleyway. And again, too, on that same idea of making it look good, making it look nice and grow and do that sort of thing, so you can see what you can get away with and everything.
If you use up all the space, go up.
That's right. Vertical, when you're in small spaces, vertical is really important. That's for
Yeah.
sure. And we do a lot of that stuff around here as well, too. And, you know, I've even had people from the city come by and check out the things that they got. And they thought it was just really fascinating and really great that, you know, we were taking advantage of those sort of spaces that would be unused or in some sense, you know, just where people would abandon things and not take, you know, in the long run, we've got this really beautiful foodscape growing, you know, instead of it just being weeds or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I know. It was great when I was in New York City, you know, seeing all the rooftop gardens that have been going
Mhm.
up, and even urban farms up on the roofs of these skyscrapers, you
Yes.
know, it's like things that you wouldn't have even necessarily conceived of. People are
Yeah.
doing everywhere you go.
Yeah. Our this last season we had for us doing a segment for our show was our friend Mark Boucher Colbert, and he lives up in Portland, Oregon, and he actually takes care of and manages a rooftop garden in downtown Portland. It's a, you know,
Nice.
4-story building, and they have a huge garden up top, and they actually grow that food to be used in the restaurant that's there on that 4th floor down below the roof there.
Right. It's
And
about
it's
as
just
low food miles as you can get.
it's really amazing, man. But I'm telling you, I want to go check out New York really bad and make some videos and see all of those really cool gardens from those, you know, really tall buildings that they've got on this, you know. There can't be
Yeah.
anything better than getting up and managing plants and, you know, food growing, you know, plants up on a rooftop of a huge cityscape, you know, cityscape like that. It would just be amazing.
Sometimes the least expected places are where the most awesome stuff is happening. You know, where you're like, what, gardening in New York? Like, hey, you can't do that. You know, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And Detroit is another place that I really want to visit because apparently in Detroit, they've taken over all these vacant lots where, you know, houses have burnt down or whatever. Like, it's, you know, the city was gutted. And then
Yeah.
all these urban gardening groups have gone out and actually planted out these vacant lots and created community gardens. So in these really unexpected ways, you know, gardening is bringing people together and regenerating the urban environment as well as, you know,
Exactly.
folks out in the country as well.
Yeah, it's always been my bigger fascination. Again, like I said, I started from a small balcony garden. I've always kind of lived in a city. You know, that's why my channel's called The Urban Gardener, you know, is, you know, that's my fascination is how people are able to utilize these sort of spaces, these unused or neglected spaces to, you know, grow something that's just, you know, not only beautiful, but useful, you know, educational, you know, all of that sort of stuff. It's just- Exactly. So let's dig in and talk a little bit about your music. You know, you got the band Formidable Vegetable, and I'm sure you got into music before your band was formed and stuff. When did that, you know, when did the inspiration and your love for music really get started with?
Well, I mean, I guess as well as being a gardener, my parents, my dad especially, was a musician and a music teacher, and my mum was a jazz singer as well. So I kind of had that from both sides, and I'd often, you know, be going to bed with the band rehearsing in the other room or something like that. And so yeah, it was a pretty natural progression for, you know, being surrounded by music all the time to like learning instruments. And when I was 7, I learned the piano, and yeah, it was all right, but I didn't really get into it. And, you know, I wrote a few songs, which is kind of funny that one of them actually made it onto this album, which a song that I wrote when I was 7 years old. I finally recycled it. That's musical composting right there. But
That's great.
then after that, I learned saxophone, and my dad was the teacher at the school, so we both learned together at the same time. And then when I was a teenager, I rebelled and I learned the drums. So I became a drummer, and I just wanted to bash stuff and make noise. And that, you know, my parents were like, "We failed as musicians," but you know, I had heaps of fun, and I actually joined a bunch of bands and toured up and down the West Coast, and even over to the States and Canada, drumming for these rock bands. And you know, we supported the Violent Femmes and Etta James and all these like epic acts. But I came home, and you know, this was about 15 years ago. And I was having heaps of fun and, you know, playing shows and having good crowds. But there was just something that wasn't quite fulfilling about it. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And I mean, traveling around, it's always tricky because, you know, you can't really connect with people, and it's, you know, it's really high paced kind of life. But I just was seeing, you know, the problems in the world emerging, like around climate change and you know, biodiversity loss and pollution and stuff. And I was like, what? want to be doing something about this. I want to help out somehow. And that's when I decided to actually quit music. And, I was going great. I had a music career, I was making a living. Not many people can say that. And I actually said, nah, music's not going to change the world. I've got to go and learn permaculture, which I'd heard about through reading this book, actually, which has just been re-released, The Earth Restorer Guide, which was all about creating sustainable systems from your backyard or from wherever you are to actually work towards solving these bigger problems with stuff like gardening. And I was like, well, that sounds like the way I grew up. So I went and enrolled in a course, and I'd done all kinds of stuff. Like I converted a truck to run on waste vegetable oil.
Nice.
And I drove that like 4,000 kilometers across Australia, smelling like fish and chips, and using waste fish and chip oil from roadhouses and whatever. I was just trying to do anything I could to like have a low impact. And so I got to this course, and I was there for 8 months. And then ironically, when I did that session on pattern understanding and pattern languages, I thought, hang on a minute, music can be used for something good. And that's when I took the permaculture principles that I'd been studying and applied them to what I already did, which was music, and then went back into playing music and creating another band. So, not 1 year after finishing that course, Formidable Vegetable started, and we were just a bit of an experiment. I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. This might go down like a lead balloon, and writing songs about gardening, like who does that? And, but we took it to a couple of festivals, and surprisingly, it just went really well. And after our first show at a festival in Australia, we got invited to tour Europe, to play Glastonbury, to go to the States and do a bunch of festivals there, and Canada. And we basically just landed a world tour after the first show. And I was like, well, the world's ripe for this stuff, it seems.
Right.
And the next 7 years was just, we were just off and touring. We toured over 20 countries and played hundreds, I don't know, maybe nearly 1,000 gigs. I can't even keep track. But and the UN even, got in touch and said, we want to use your song for the International Year of Soil, which was back in 2015. And so our song became the official song for the Year of Soil. And it just felt like such a great, fulfilling combination of things that I love, which is music and gardening and permaculture. And to be able to do that all in one go was just like, how did I get this dream job? Like, this is amazing. So
exactly.
Blessing. And then getting into the kids stuff later on, like we actually we joined a kids label in the States back in 2020, and they sort of started kind of pushing us in the direction of like writing more kids songs. And so I was like, great, well, kids songs for gardening and permaculture, that's a thing. So that's what we've been doing for the last few years. But it's really for everyone. It's not just for kids, it's for families, or I just wanted to keep it accessible so that kids and parents could learn. And and we've got banging electronic beats as well, so everyone can rock out on the dance floor if they want. So it's a bit of a mashup.
Yes. I've seen some of your shows and watched some of that stuff. Everybody seems to have some real fun with the music and everything that you're able to create. And again, too, how awesome that you're able to take something so unique in a way as, permaculture and gardening music, and be able to tap into, all of the, everybody out there and all their passions for all of the different aspects of, growing, and like you said, permaculture and all of that, to the point where, you hit on something really big, that, you got a chance to go check out the whole world, through that.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
But I think people are ready for it. I think people feel something is changing, and people are drawn more and more to gardening, because I think like gardening, and especially food production, is the next, like, it's going to be like the most exalted status in society. When we start hitting limits of energy and minerals and things like that, because that is where our food comes from. And, most of the world's food doesn't actually come from these giant, corporations and big farms. It comes from backyard gardeners and small producers and small farmers. I think somewhere in, Russia or somewhere, 95% of their food comes from the small farmers, and about 5% comes from, monoculture farming. But You know, that's probably a similar stat in a lot of other countries as well. And it's not just that the quantity of food, but the quality of the food as well. You know, there's nothing better. Anyone who's eaten a homegrown tomato will just say that you can't even compare it to a supermarket bought thing that, you know, you could bounce on the table 20 times and it wouldn't even bruise. You know, it's like there's a different motive there. There's a profit motive, and then there's the health motive. And, you know, measuring food by you know, wealth per acre or the yield versus the health per acre and the nutrient density, I think is a real difference. And, you know, you can guarantee that the food bought from big chain supermarkets, it's going to be, you know, based on this one rather than this one. So, I really feel like a lot of people are coming around to that idea, and they want to nourish themselves, and they want to be healthy, and they want to have healthy communities. So that's why more and more people are growing food, and I guess getting into songs about it at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's check out one more of your songs that you have there with your band, Formidable Vegetable.
Whenever I come to see you, I always find you outside with your hands in the ground, getting down with anything that grows. And all I wanna do is join you in that morning sunshine. I wanna know how you grow all your vegetables. 'Cause we're gonna grow a garden. We're gonna grow a garden, yeah. We're gonna grow a garden, darling. Well, I saved you some seeds from my pumpkins and peas, and I can foresee we'll get them growing like weeds. We could stay up real late and plant them by the moon. And we're gonna make everyone jealous when they see what we've got growing on the trellis. It'll be raining down in our very own food monsoon. 'Cause we're gonna grow a garden. We're gonna grow a garden, yeah. We're gonna grow a garden, darling. Said we're gonna grow a garden. We're gonna grow a garden, yeah. We're gonna grow a garden, darling, yeah. When we've made our beds, we gon' raise that veg. Let the chickens out when they've laid their eggs. Growing asparagus, spaghetti, squash, strawberries. Oh, we can eat so much from our garden. We're gonna grow a garden, yeah. We're gonna grow a garden, darling, yeah. Said we're gonna grow a garden. Gonna grow that garden, yeah. We're gonna grow a garden, darling, yeah.
So, all right. So you started with your first album. I believe it was called Permaculture, which is a fitting title, right? A
Rhymer's
Writer's Manual. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
That's a great one there. And how many other albums and have you done since? Or
Oh, we're up to 7, I think. This one's number 7. But Yeah, so we did a remix album after that. We somehow found ourselves on the electronic music festival scene. I don't know how that happened, because originally it was designed as an educational tool. I was like, who's going to listen to this? Probably people studying permaculture or gardening or kids or something. But we ended up playing to a bunch of electronic ravers for a few years, which don't ask me how that happened. So we did a remix album with, sort of electronic beats that they'd be able to dig. And then after that, we did a kids album called Grow Do It, which became the name of our education collective as well. And after that, it sort of went from kind of adulty, kiddie, like somewhere in between music, which I really like, because it works on a lot of different levels. So the first album was based on the permaculture principles. It was literally like the book I was reading at the time. The chapters of the book became each song, which is possibly the nerdiest thing a musician's ever done. But, I was really go out on a limb. And then after that, I realized after the kids album that permaculture is a system. So permaculture is not a kind of gardening, for anyone who hasn't come across it before. It's more of a system of thinking about, different ways to create regenerative systems. And there's a whole lot of principles which are just really helpful pointers to kind of, create sustainable systems, like produce no waste and use small solutions and use the edges and that kind of thing. But at the core of it, there's these ethics. And I think that's where it differs from other sciences and other, things in our life, is that it's based on ethics. And the three ethics are earth care, people care, and fair share, or redistribution of surplus. And those three things are, I think, one of the most important parts of the whole framework. And I thought, well, I've got these songs about the principles, but I haven't talked about the ethics. I've got to do something about that. So our next album was about the permaculture ethics, and it was called Earth, People, Fair. So, bringing it back to that real core about why are we doing this? Like, why do I want to grow food? Why do I want to garden? It's like, to regenerate the earth, to look after community, to have something to give away, my surplus and that kind of thing. So, and after that, we just kind of started pumping out kids albums, and we just keep on going, really.
Yeah. All the way up to your newest album, Microbiome, which I think what we'll do is we'll have a link down below for everybody to be able to go check that out and find a way to purchase that here in the States and everything, and check it out. And I encourage everybody to go check out all the other things, other albums, videos, all sorts of stuff you can find out there, showing what you guys do, because it's so great. And again, you did kind of mention,
people want to support us on Patreon. That always helps.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And we'll be able to find that on their website down below as well, too, in some links that we have there. Now, you did touch on there for a second what I wanted to kind of talk with you about again, too, kind of getting back again to one of the big things you're utilizing your music for is education. You have a education collective called Grow Do It. You want to talk about that just a little bit more?
Yeah, so it actually started with the first album, and because the point of the Permaculture Rhymers Manual album was to educate people about the permaculture principles. So I had this idea that it wouldn't just be an album, but we'd create teaching resources to go with it, and start teaching courses and using that as educational tools. But when the band took off, we didn't have time to do much of that, so we just toured and played music. And but a few years ago, when I did the Earth, People, Fair album, I met an illustrator called Brenna Quinlan, who's now my partner. And that was a pretty good match, because she is a permaculture illustrator. And so she does beautiful drawings, which, are all over the web about, exactly the kind of stuff that I sing about. And, you can see her illustrations in this kids album. She does these really cute sort of, pen and watercolor drawings. And I just loved her artwork, and I said, hey, do you want to work together, to make an album cover or a music video or something? She said, yeah. And we started working together, and then we started being together, and we resurrected Grow Do It as our sort of collective permaculture education outlet. And we've made a few posters and a deck of cards, permaculture action cards, that are sort of awesome. Like, flashcards with a bunch of her illustrations on them, to teach kids and anyone else really about the ethics and principles of permaculture, and more importantly, how to put them into action in the garden or in the community or at home. And, because we just saw a need for, really an opening for kids and school teachers to kind of introduce this stuff into the classroom, and people were looking around for resources and there wasn't much there. So we're like, great, we'll create something. So that's been awesome. And we go around doing workshops as well. I'm heading out on Thursday to do one with some little kids where we play songs and play the cards and talk about it, and then go out in the garden and look at plants. And it's just a great little immersive way to use art and music as a tool for, getting all this stuff across, because it's just so much fun, and kids learn a heap from it as well.
I love it. It's awesome. And, again, for everybody, we're in the States, you're in Australia, things are a little bit the opposite. So when this interview is being aired, we're heading into our summer season, and which will be your winter season. But I know that you're still kind of continuing to tour a little bit. Is there anything, do you guys have any plans coming out of this winter, going into next year, or anything like that you look forward to?
Well, since we just released this about a month ago, and I'm going to get back into the studio and start writing some more songs. We're actually going up to the north over winter, which would be pretty nice because the weather's always cool, tropical and beautiful up there. And we've taken a couple of months doing some shows, but actually to try and write and come up with some new material, because there's no shortage of stuff to write about. And it's, when you're on the road touring all the time, it's impossible to kind of knuckle down and get stuff done. So yeah, wintertime's a great opportunity for that, and just sort of coming inside and coming up with some new ideas. But yeah, we've actually just started our own garden as well. We're building a house at the moment on a permaculture community, and we're just starting to, get the compost ready and plant out our crops. So when we go away to tour, it's hard, to plant anything super intensive. So we generally put in a crop of broad beans and garlic and just long-term stuff that we come home and then it's ready, and
exactly.
weeds. So we've been doing that as well. So, I call it time-lapse gardening, because you just put it in and then you go and you come back, it's like, bing, done.
Yeah. That's so true. I love garlic myself too. And so my garlic's been waiting in the ground all through our winter, and it's now that now that it's going into summertime, it's going to be about ready to pull out of the ground.
Yeah.
And be nice and ready for us, So that's so awesome, Charlie. And I really, really awesome to have a conversation with you and talk about all of these just awesome things that you're doing with music and permaculture and gardening and all of that stuff. I really hope for some really even more great success, even though you've had such awesome successes already with your band Formidable Vegetable. And again, everybody who's watching this can check out some links down below in our description to be able to catch up with more of what you got going on, and some more of your music and all of that too. And hopefully maybe we'll get to see you at one of those heirloom expositions here coming soon too.
Hopefully. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks again, man. You take care. We'll see you real soon.
See you later.
Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits. Better turn the audio on there. So, all right, what an awesome interview there with Charlie Mgee of Formidable Vegetable, and some really great music added to our show this week. Just a really great conversation about all sorts of great things in gardening and education, and all the things that they're doing with their music and everything is just really inspiring. So really, really, again, one of those guests that I've wanted to have on just as we get this show started and everything, for sure, because I think that they're just such an inspiring group of people headed there by Charlie Mgee. And I hope you all enjoyed that interview, as well as our discussion with Marty Ware from Marty's Garden. Just really glad to be able to have a conversation with him as well too, because I've been following him for so many years, and to be able to have him on my show and discuss different things going on with his garden and how he got his channel started and all that sort of stuff. Just some really great things that I really was glad to be able to have a conversation with him about. And down the road, maybe some more as well too, as we're going to be continuing moving on with this show. As I kind of explained a little bit earlier in the show too, is that it's real important for all of you who watch this show, especially those of you who are, I guess now as we're ending the show, watching on the replay or all of that, is to get down in the comments there. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know if there's anybody or anything in particular you'd like to see on our show as well too. I'm open to all sorts of suggestions. I'd love to hear about what you think and everything. This is a live show, so it's all about you, the live audience, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting to see some of the things that you would really like to see on our show, because that's what we're all about. It's just to have some fun here on the weekend morning and discuss our passion for growing and gardening right here on the Urban Gardener channel. So also too, we do want to acknowledge our sponsor, Ivy Organics, again, and just thank them again for sponsoring us and being a part of our show. And if you get a chance to go and check out their website at ivyorganics.com, use our promo code GROW10 in their shop, save 10%. And just one of those great ways to be able to support our show is to support those who are supporting us, I guess, through the sponsorship we get from Ivy Organics. Really great company, so really glad to have them again a part of our show. And I just wanted to mention too, this next Saturday, we should be having on our show Christy Wilhelmy. She's the author of this book, Garden Variety. I read this book this last winter, and I just thought it was fantastic. It's a book of fiction and gardening combined, so I just thought it was just a really great read. So I'm really excited about having the author on with us as well. She also has a website, I think, called Garden Nerd as well too. So we'll talk to her about all of that sort of stuff, about the book, and about any possible other books that will be coming out of this one as well too. So I encourage you all to go check out Garden Variety. Go to get yourself a copy, read the book, come join with us next week, and hear all about how she thought of the book and the characters and all of the things that are involved with the story, as well as other things that she has growing on as well too. So really excited about having Christy Wilhelmy with us this next Saturday. So be sure, if you are here with us, hit that like button, give us a thumbs up, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And be sure to share our show with all of your friends, and go check out our website at letsgetgrowing.live. And so one thing we're going to do here as we leave, I'm going to play one more song from the band Formidable Vegetable. And again, really great to have some music on our show this week. So again, I want to thank you all so much for joining with us. And from all of us here at Let's Get Growing, Have a great week, and we'll see you next Saturday.
Noise for MC Be Real. Put your hands in the air. What you got?
1, 2, 3. There's a whole world down there.
Down where?
I'll tell you where. Right under your feet, where the land of plants meet. It's a soil food web and it's a banging good time. Come on down underground and meet some friends of mine.
I'm flatulent. I mean a flatulent. I got this whippy tail. Can you imagine it? I got a motion promotion in the primordial ocean to get me swimming around. Now I'm smashing.
I'm amoeba, I'm a yuba, a shapeshifter. Look, I'm a tuba. I swim around like a blob, doing my job, and sometimes I'm slime mold with the mob.
I'm the arch never too. You get a bad rap when you're nothing but a tube that moves and unattractive, not a villain, just a bit of killing with 400 quintillion siblings. What's wrong with that? Fungus sacrifice.
Yeah.
Bacteria's back. All right.
Baby eating and breathing and moving, dancing and creeping. It's like a party going on right under your nose. If you know some folks with a microscope, get them to show you the ropes.
Sing it with me.
Below.
It's the soil, food, web. Come on. Get it in your head and your garden bed. One more time, everybody, come on. I said the soil, food, web. Yeah. That's what I said, and it's how we fed.
Take a ride on a nutrient cycle. It's always breaking down, but that's what it's like, yo. It's kind of the point. If it didn't real soon, we'd have junk piled up all the way to the moon. Don't let anyone tell you that compost ain't boss. Without it, life would stop. Like, actually. Cover the soil with mulch, shade, and plants and discover the joy of the
One more time, everybody say soil, food, web. In your biggest voices. Get it in your head and your garden bed. One more time, you want to sing it with me?
All right.
The soil, food, web. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I said, and it's how we fed. What do you reckon? Make some noise for MC Be Real. In the house, out of the house. Straight out of compost.
Straight out of compost.